Apparently new games such as Diablo Immortal has the audacity to add dungeons and rifts that cost the player up to $25 every single run. So you know what? I'm gonna make some goddamn dungeons as well. And after hours of research, studying and thinking about the release of Diablo Immortal, I came up with this radical new idea that will probably revolutionize the mobile game industry. And here it is. I will not require players to pay $25 to enter a fucking dungeon. Thank you. I know it's crazy. Thank you. But seriously though, just because you're making a mobile game doesn't give anyone the excuse to be that greedy and abusive. Anyways, it's about goddamn time that we add some dungeons in our game as well. Welcome back to another devlog for PixelTribe, the game where you build and upgrade your own clan of Vikings and send your Vikings on raids against big bad baddies for free. So, as you can see from this amazing drawing right here, I have for a long time had the idea of adding dungeons to my game. I actually wanted the dungeons to work much like the Greater Rifts from Diablo 3, where the main idea is that you fight your way down the dungeons to tougher and tougher levels and gain increasingly better rewards as you delve deeper, as well as getting a higher spot on the leaderboards. Not only does this give players a way to show off their skills on a leaderboard, but dungeons like this offer quite a lot of content since the levels are auto-generated and thus infinite, and since we can add different seasons that will reset some of the leaderboards every month. So, the very first thing we need to do is draw the actual dungeon where all the fights will take place. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what this dungeon should look like, and it ended up something like this. Now, while drawing this, I realized every single raid that I've ever made has been 4 Vikings fighting another 4 enemies. And this is starting to become really fucking boring. But what if we could add multiple waves of enemies to the fight to make things more interesting? So I decided that every level in the dungeons should consist of 3 waves of enemies with a boss at the end. So people now have to be much more careful about when and how they use their abilities, and it might require a lot more planning than previously. So now our dungeon fight area needed to be much longer, and after some more drawing I ended up with these 3 fight areas in the dungeon. So with the dungeon drawn, we now need to implement that and change some things to actually support 3 waves of enemies. So then we just need to define the new positions of the enemies and our Vikings and change some things in the code. Now once you kill the first enemies, they will automatically continue to the next fight like the good little puppets they are. But we are currently fighting against a hard-coded group of enemies, and in our dungeon we want all our enemies to be randomly generated. So now we need to create some code that can actually generate random creatures with different armor, classes and abilities. And to spice things up even further, we also need a boss at the end of every dungeon that has some extra abilities, health and damage. So with all of this in place, we actually have our entire dungeon fight completely done, with random enemies, 3 waves and a boss at the end. But we still need to figure out a way for the player to actually unlock these dungeons, cause nothing comes free in life. So now we need a dungeon tile that the player can build in their village to unlock this new dungeon feature. So then it's back to Asprite and create this new tile. And with a small inspiration of the Mines of Moria entrance, we now have a dungeon tile that is unlocked in level 14, costs 1000 gold and can be built to unlock our new dungeon feature. Also, please like and subscribe. A single boop of that like button is incredibly helpful for a small YouTuber like myself. Thank you. And now all that's missing is to create the actual screens where you can select and start a dungeon. So after about 3 days of drawing, coding the behavior and adding the leaderboards, we ended up with this right here. So you can access the dungeon screens either by going through your new dungeon tile or using the tabs here in the raid screen. But once you're here, you can see a full list of the dungeon levels as well as a leaderboard right here with the highest dungeon level you have completed. Now I didn't just add one single global leaderboard, but every single country has its own leaderboard as well. And as you can see right here, I've also added a seasons tab, which is basically the exact same page as the normal dungeon, except this entire page with the levels and the leaderboards will reset every single month. And all the seasonal leaderboards also have their own leaderboards for your specific country. So now absolutely everything should be ready for you guys to test it out and see if you can find any bugs. But before I can release the update with the new dungeons, I also got a small video from one of my testers showcasing how they managed to create a crazy OP fight strategy that made it possible for them to get way further than they should with their current gear. So here you can see that they basically stun lock and root the enemies in place forever, making the enemies do absolutely no damage to your Vikings. So thank you Sopek for pointing this out and coming up with the idea of adding some CC cooldowns on our enemies as well. So now the OP strategy should be balanced and the dungeon should be ready. So now you guys can start competing on who gets to the highest levels in the dungeon. And if you want to join the beta testing of this game, please join the Discord channel in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this devlog and have a wonderful day.